What's going on, guys? Andrew Piluk Hockey here, back again with another video. Today I'm going to be looking at a few rumors and a few things that people have been suggesting that I talk about for a little while now. So if you were the people that requested this, here is the video. And also, just like I said, a couple things that have been mentioned by some of the bigger media outlets that I've kind of waited to see how it pans out before I really give my opinion on it. So that's what we are going to be doing in this video. But if you are new here and you like Leafs news and rumor talk like that, make sure to like this video and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Join the squad. I'd love to have you guys here. Tons of Leaf stuff coming up, especially towards the NHL trade deadline. I'm hoping to be able to actually stream during a lot of that time as well here on YouTube. So maybe that's something that you guys would want to stick around for. But I don't want to waste any more time. The first thing I want to talk about here is Petr Mrazek. So Mrazek obviously hasn't had the best season so far with the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's looked pretty decent as of late. You know, he's been stepping up a little bit, but it's a very small sample size, both good and bad. So the big question mark here was why the Leafs signed that 3-year contract worth $3.8 million annually. And I'll be honest with you guys, I was kind of on the fence with this deal. I think even in my video, I had said that when he initially signed the deal. But now there's potential that this might not be a long-term solution for the Toronto Maple Leafs, because there's a lot of speculation about the future of Mrazek because of Campbell's contract. And this, of course, was on January 29th when they posted this. But again, I am a little bit late to it. But there's been some discussion, especially during the 32 Thoughts segment on Hockey Night in Canada, talking about the fact that there might be some interest around the league, for Mrazek, and it's not initiated by the Toronto Maple Leafs, which is obviously good for the Leafs, because if teams are calling on him, it means that this is clearly something that the Leafs have a little bit of leverage over. They won't have to add additional pieces to remove this contract, because if you do look at it and you look at goaltenders around the league, Mrazek, if he is healthy, at $3.8 million, especially if he is playing a good amount of games, is actually not that bad of a contract. But it's him staying healthy is the biggest problem. And if you look back at his previous numbers, he has had some pretty good years. He's had some pretty good stretches of games, and teams obviously are inquiring about that version of Petr Mrazek. So basically, the reason why I'm talking about this is because of clearly of cap space. People have been asking me whether or not the Leafs would trade Mrazek before the deadline, to bring in a cheaper goaltender. And we will get to what I think about the Campbell contract as well in this video. But it seems as though that Dubas is not really concerned about this right now, and that he might be willing to look at this in the offseason. He might think about this in the summer, because if there's interest now and Mrazek, plays more and he's a little bit healthier and he continues to have a good season, hopefully, we're going to knock on wood, he stays healthy and has a good rest of the season, there's definitely going to be some interest in him, and it's something that the Leafs would probably be able to do. Now, the reason why this was also brought up is because there's a free agent goaltender, Matt Gudsa, who's 21, an overager for the Barrie Colts of the OHL. He's got a really good start to his year so far, 11-2, 1.89 goals against, and a .935 save percentage. So the Leafs are apparently really trying to sign this guy. And I don't know. We'll have to see what happens, but he's not going to be the backup for the Toronto Maple Leafs coming out of the OHL. I think he's more or less going to be a guy that they throw to the Marley system and hope that he can develop there. And we'll get back to the goaltending situation after we talk about a little bit more about Mrazek here. We'll get to Campbell later on. But the $3.8 million is what people think it's impossible to trade this deal. Like I said, there is interest, and if there's teams calling the Leafs on him, they definitely can move this deal. He's got the modified no trade clause, which might be a little bit difficult. But if he's given a better situation than being the backup to Jack Campbell, maybe he would be intrigued by that. He's got a couple more years left on that deal, so teams would be getting him for a few seasons. Now, if we look at his numbers, like I mentioned before, it's not the worst. I mean, even right now, his numbers don't look too bad in a very small sample size. Last year, again, good numbers. Obviously, with more games played, look at these numbers. Very, very good. Teams at $3.8 million. I'm sure some teams would be very interested in that. Even in the playoffs, that 5 games, he had a good run there. the playoffs in terms of his save percentage, not so good. Goals against average, not the greatest, but still anything under 3, I think a lot of teams are willing to move on that. That 54 games played where he had the 2.33 in 15-16. Like, this is the thing with Mrazek. He's capable of being very, very good, and teams would love to acquire him, but it's the health and like what version of him are you getting. So something to look at, and the Leafs are going to have to shed some money in the offseason to try to, sign Campbell and have a good team and be able to sign a bottom 6 and sign a good, decent second and third pairing defenseman. And we'll get to that. Stay tuned for that. But the next thing I want to talk about is really surprising me. A lot of people keep bringing this up, and that's Alex Kerfoot. Now, if you're looking at Kerfoot right now, 31 points in 42 games played. He's on pace to have his career year. Like, he's been incredible. And a lot of people are looking at this $3.5 million for this season and next year, and he's got the modified no trade clause that kicks in next season. People are saying it's too expensive for him to be on this team, but Kerfoot's been insanely good in the top 6, and he's also a really reliable defensive forward. People only look at the money, and they look at only their favorite players who are getting paid less money and think, oh, well, why aren't they paying him that much? He should be getting paid this much. He's too expensive for this team, blah, 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 blah. Kerfoot at 3.5 is a very good number, and people also have a bad taste in their mouth because of the Kadri deal. I'm going to remind everybody, Kadri was my favorite player on this team. Not Matthews, Nylander, Martin. Kadri was my favorite player. I loved the guy. He embodies everything that it should be, to just be a hardcore, hard-nosed player. But he got suspended twice in a row. He wasn't even helping the Leafs in the playoffs because he wasn't playing. And Dubas didn't have a choice. He had to go with the best trade package available. And at the time, it was Tyson Barrie and Kerfoot. Dubas tried to trade Kadri to Calgary previously for TJ Brody and Sam Bennett. Kadri nixed the deal. He did not want to go to Calgary. So there was a lot of obstacles and everything that goes along with this, but Kerfoot has provided great value for the Leafs at $3.5 million. And I think it would be really silly to consider trading him at this year's deadline unless you're significantly upgrading on that second line. For some reason, he gets tossed into pretty well every trade rumor when it comes to, putting money in and putting money out. But I want to direct you guys to their playoff stats last year. William Nylander had 8 points in 7 games, and Kerfoot had 6 in 7. He provided the Leafs with a significant amount of depth, and he shouldn't have been second in points, but he was. Marner, Matthews, those guys didn't provide the offense that they should have been as the top players on this team. And of course, with Tavares being hurt, if those guys perform and, obviously Tavares doesn't get injured, the Leafs are obviously a much deeper, much better team. But they didn't get those performances from their top guys. They got it from their secondary players. So I'm not really sure why Kerfoot's the guy that people would move on from. Again, unless it's a significant upgrade. And the biggest reason why I'm telling you guys this is because look at the team. This is next season, not this season. This is the following year. People are probably looking at this 81.5 cap and saying, but it's supposed to go up. Well, the latest rumor is that the cap is probably not going to be going up. There's a lot of doubt that it's not going to be going up to 82.5 like it was once rumored, that it would once again be staying at 81.5. So just as a hypothetical here, the Leafs still having Kerfoot would make a lot of sense because that completes their top 6. Nick Robertson would be a guy that I would consider calling up and hoping that he takes that next step because you're going to need cheaper guys. You're hoping to get Jason Spezza back on a very cheap deal. And I gave Andre Kasha $2 million because if you're still trying to keep this guy, he's probably going to be in that range, the $1.7 to $2 million range. So hypothetically, you're going to see some contracts here that I might have underpaid or overpaid. I just threw some numbers out there to see if maybe this would be roughly what the Leafs would be working with. Now, the reason I also bring this up is because Jack Campbell is probably getting anywhere from $5.5 to $6 million. The Leafs would have $1.4 million in cap space if they traded Ritchie, Hall, and Mrazek. So how do you upgrade on any of these positions. You have a top 6 where Sandin's getting a raise, Liljegren's getting a raise. You're keeping Dermott, you're keeping Brody, Muzzin, Riley. You still have to fill in this spot. You still have to fit in the backup goaltender spot, and the roster size would be around 20 players. It's going to be really difficult to keep guys around here, especially at cheaper numbers, because you have to sign Campbell, you have to sign Kasha, you have to sign Sandin, Liljegren. It's going to be very difficult to get players that are good for a decent amount of money to fit under the cap for the Toronto Maple Leafs. They have to have guys like Kerfoot, in my opinion, because if you do trade Kerfoot, who becomes his replacement? Are you just assuming Robertson's going to step up and be incredible? I hope so, but that's not a guarantee. So if you're losing a guy like Kerfoot, you might even be losing a guy like Robertson at the deadline if you're trying to acquire a player. The Leafs are in trouble next season for their cap. I'm sorry, they really are. And as much as people would love to blame Kyle Dubas, sure, he's overpaid on Mitch Marner. And that's probably the biggest deal that he overpaid on by about $1.5 million. Okay, maybe $2 million. You can argue he paid a little bit too much on some other guys, but we're not going to do that in this video. The thing going on in the world right now, YouTube loves to demonetize when we say the word of what's going on right now, but it screwed every team in the league up that needed a lot more money when it came to their cap, because the cap could be around $87 to $90 million by now because of the new team coming in, Seattle, and because of the new TV deal that with ESPN and all this other stuff. That was like a $400 million deal. If they didn't have any of these, a bunch of this stuff going on with what's going on in the world right now, the NHL would be laughing. They would have a higher cap hit. The Leafs would be okay. Lots of teams would be okay. There would be a lot more players that you've seen before on this team, probably still on this team because of them being able to have the money to keep them. It's a big difference. There's a huge difference. But what I'm trying to say is before you just go trading off all these guys, you have to look into the future. The Leafs are going to need some extra cash. You could say maybe Campbell signs for like 5 to 5.5. That saves you a little bit of money, okay? Maybe you're able to get Spezza at $750K instead of $800K. That saves you a little bit. Maybe Kasha signs for 1.8. Maybe Sandin signs for 1.8. Maybe Liljegren gets 1. It doesn't matter. These are still going to be tight corners for the Toronto Maple Leafs. This is going to be very tight for them on the cap. So they have to be careful of who they're acquiring now, going towards this deadline, and who they're acquiring in the offseason or trading. And again, like I said, they would only have this cap space if they traded all 3 of these guys, which is very possible and I'm sure could happen, but teams have to want these guys too. So it's not just going to be easy to remove this money. That's a lot of money that they would have still on this team and not be able to sign some of these guys if they don't remove these guys. Because if you still have a Nick Ritchie buried in the minors, which would only save the Leafs a little bit of money there, if you still have Justin Hall on this blue line and you still have Petr Mrazek, the Leafs are almost $6 million above the salary cap. And that's obviously not a good thing. We might as well just put Ritchie here because they wouldn't have a 4th line forward. That's almost $7 million. So it's very, very difficult to look at the deadline coming up and just go, trade this guy, everything will be fine. You have to look at next year a little bit. While I do believe the Leafs should be going all in, they might have to be going all in with guys with no term, because people want Chychrun and all these other guys, but if you add guys with term onto this team, it's just going to be more difficult to keep the players that you have before. So again, I was just kind of spitballing at the end of this video, but that's why I'm kind of against the Kerfoot thing. I think that he solidifies their top 6 for this season and next year, unless you're significantly upgrading on that position at this deadline and you feel like he's the guy that has to go. But I just don't think with the morale of this team, I think Kerfoot just fits in perfectly. I think a lot of people really like him. It's been said before many times that Kerfoot's a real good guy and he fits in really well with this team. I'm not sure if that's a forward move or a backwards move for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So Mrazek, Kerfoot, any other guy that you want a video made on specifically, or you want me to talk about, comment down below. We can have a good discussion about it. And if you are new here, make sure to like this video and subscribe. Tons more videos on the way. And hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.